Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi and today I have another Series 10 team report, and this time we don't have a special guest because it's just me. Because I got second place in the Desafio LATAM tournament. And so if you were wondering, where have you been? It's been like a month since the last team report. And you're right, it has. The last team report on this channel was when Mike D'Angelo won the first edition of the Desafio LATAM circuit. And this is the fourth tournament. In fact, the third tournament was also won by the same team that Mike used to win. And I basically haven't played VGC since the first tournament that we played in with that Pelipper team that was absolutely insane. And so I was just like getting back into the game. I hadn't played, and I asked in my group chat, hey, what team should I bring? And my good friend Sohaib, who has worked with me and Mike a lot, said, just bring Calyrex. It's broken, and you just get to click buttons. And I was like, yeah. That sounds like the way I want to like reintroduce myself to this format. Is just kind of click buttons, and if I do well, I do well, and if I do poorly, at least my games are taking 15 minutes and not 45 minutes to finish. And that was the entire reasoning. I played 0 games with this team before the tournament, but you might notice the 6 Pokemon you might have seen them before. Of course, not only did I use these 6 Pokemon, but also the other finalist, Francis, also used these same 6 Pokemon, different movesets. The last one is cut off by my head, but it was in fact the same 6 Pokemon. And also, we have a team report on the channel already from literally Yuki used the team back in July to get second place at another tournament with the exact same 6 Pokemon. And so I'm not going to talk about like the team building process because 1, I didn't build the team, and 2, the team is very well established. I think that it is by far the best Calyrex team. Again, the fact that it got first and second place in this tournament and has consistently been getting results ever since the very start of this format should tell you enough. But I do want to talk about maybe some of the team building choices that we made and the trade-offs that you have to decide between in team building, maybe some of the things that I would change. And of course, at the end of the video, there will be a rental team. I'm not going to talk too much about my tournament run, at least the top cut part of it, because I did actually record all of my games from the top cut. And so what I want to do, I've been thinking about doing something like this for a little bit, is I'm going to actually just post all of the top cut matches in one video, one long video, and give you a little bit of insight into, because this was an open team sheet tournament, what I saw in team preview and what I saw when I was looking at the team sheet and how I was like approaching the matchup. And then after the match, I will talk a little bit about my thoughts about how the match played out and maybe some of the like important parts of the game and what I was thinking in those parts of the game. And so hopefully that can give you some insight into it without just like dumping all the matches without any commentary, but also not having to like commentate over the entire thing. And so that'll probably be out sometime later this week. But yeah, let's just talk about the team, I guess. So this team, pretty standard. There are some slight differences to the team that Yuki used way back in July, obviously. Most notably, this is a Choice Scarf Urshifu instead of the bulkier Mystic Water set. The bulk lives a Rillaboom Grassy Glide, which is pretty standard at this point. And again, pretty standard Scarf Urshifu, but we used it just because Urshifu Calyrex provides a lot of pins. There's a lot more Entei in the format, and so Urshifu is really, really important to be able to beat that. Also, outspeeding opposing Calyrex is very important at times. Outspeeding things like potentially Neoligo. There's a lot of things that you want to outspeed in this format. And so Scarf Urshifu just generally is a little more powerful, a little faster, and that's kind of how the team wants to play. It wants to have that faster mode. And then, the Incineroar, pretty standard. We aren't running Taunt, we're running Throat Chop instead to kind of respect opposing Calyrex a little more. And it is bulky. This is actually the exact same set from Mike's team. I just kind of copied the Pokemon. I didn't have a reason not to. The notable difference is that it's Citrus instead of Safety Goggles, and the pace that Sohaib gave me was Goggles, but when looking at the team, if you see this team sheet, you're probably not bringing Amoonguss into it. And in fact, there was like one very notable match where my opponent like had a Payapa Berry Amoonguss. I played that person twice and didn't bring it to either of the matches because you have a sub Calyrex. Like sub Psyshock Calyrex is such a good Amoonguss counter that no opponent is going to reasonably bring Amoonguss into you, and therefore the Incineroar doesn't really need Safety Goggles. Neoligo standard. Calyrex is pretty standard at this point. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do with the moveset, but Substitute was crazy all tournament, and Life Orb is pretty standard. I think that Calyrex doesn't need the Life Orb, but like you miss out on some calcs that you really want if you're running Spell Tag, and then Specs, it makes you a lot more linear, so there aren't a ton of other options there. And then Psyshock is, again, really good into Amoonguss, really good to have that single target move that isn't necessarily a ghost type, can hit some normal type Pokemon as well. And yeah, that's pretty much like all there is to Calyrex. The Rillaboom is the exact same Rillaboom as Mike's team from the first Desafio. Again, didn't see a reason to change it. Also, the same moveset that Yuki used, but I should note that I wanted to outspeed every other Rillaboom and every other Incineroar with my Incineroar and Rillaboom. And the Rillaboom in the finals, when it the 6-mon mirror, the Rillaboom's actually speed tied, and my opponent's Incineroar outsped mine, and that was a really, really important dynamic in that matchup. But generally speaking, your Incineroar and Rillaboom will outspeed opposing Incineroars and Rillabooms, which is really important when you're playing this sort of like hyper offensive team, even though this team obviously has a lot more tools to play defensively. At the end of the day, it still is a Calyrex team. It still is going to be playing pretty aggressively in general. And then finally, of course, the Whimsicott. Whimsicott has a lot of moves it can run, but we opted for a Tailwind, Moonblast. Protect felt mandatory. You can run Helping Hand over Protect. You just need something to do on those fake out turns. But Protect was, really valuable. I did miss Helping Hand occasionally. I think that's something that you can decide on your own. And then Encore is the last move slot, and we were debating between Taunt and Encore, even potentially Grass Knot, to help buff the Kyogre matchup a little bit. But the Encore was, Sohybe said Encore is really good into the Xerneas matchup. It was pretty good into Xerneas. It has some utility elsewhere as well. In particular, it really punishes your opponent for clicking Protect. And that's something that most people want to do into Calyrex teams a lot. They want to protect, reposition. You have a lot of tools to reposition, so your opponent might like protect in front of your Incineroar, and you can just switch out into a Whimsicott and Encore the protect. Dynamics like that come into play quite often, and I do think that the Whimsicott set can be improved. And I'll talk about that when I'm talking about the matchups, because in particular, the Whimsicott needs to put in work against Torn Ogre, and I think you can optimize it a little further for that, and my opponent in finals did that. And so the team itself, again, pretty standard team. The matchup spread was really good. I think that the one weak point was the Torn Ogre matchup. I guess we can talk about that first. I played a Torn Ogre in round 3 of Swiss. It was not Santi's Torn Ogre. It was the Mystic Waters Torn Ogre team, and I got bodied. I did not know how to approach the matchup. Again, I was figuring out the team as I was going, and didn't really did not have a good way to play it. And then in Top Cut, I also played it, and I, of course, beat it in Top 16, and in that next video, I will show you how I beat it, but I have no idea how I pulled that out. That game too, I was not supposed to win that game. It was not okay that I won that game at all. And again, you can watch the next video to see exactly how it happened. I gotta watch the video to figure out what the heck happened as well. But yeah, Torn Ogre was really, really difficult. And Sohybe told me before the tournament that the Weavile version, the Santino's team, basically was unwinnable with this version of the team. And my finals opponent had a really interesting Whimsicott tech that I think actually really helps. So before the tournament, we were talking about, okay, how do we improve this matchup? Maybe we run bulky Whimsicott with Grass Knot to live a triple axle and then do damage back. But the problem is that you have to put so much investment in bulk to be able to do that, that suddenly your Grass Knot isn't doing enough. But my opponent in finals used that exact bulky set. You have to put a lot of investment in defense. You live the triple axle, and also he had a Rocky Helmet on the set. And that was a really cool tech, I think, because it meant that you were hitting that Serena back for a lot of damage, hitting the Weavile. I think Weavile probably still KOs you, but the Weavile is taking a lot back, breaking the sash, or you just Moonblasted or whatnot. And also, he had Sunny Day on the set, so instead of having to rely on, I think you get 20 special attack EVs if you do that. So instead of having to rely on the very minimal amount of special attack, you just get to click Sunny Day and try to mitigate the Torn Ogre that way. I haven't tested it obviously, but it seemed to work for him. I don't know how many Kyogres he played, but I think it kind of solves the problems in a way that we were moving towards but hadn't quite figured out yet. So that was a cool idea that I think I might want to change the Whimsicott set to. But obviously then you're dropping a utility move, which is a little harder to do. So we'll work on it and figure it out. But for now, this is still like the standard Whimsicott set. And again, I did manage to beat the Torn Ogre teams. I think you really just have to call them out on leads. And so Neoligo is surprisingly important because if they don't lead Kyogre, your Neoligo puts immediate pressure on the Tornadus and the Serena, and they don't have a great switch in. And if you can match Tailwind, then the Neoligo potentially outspeeds the Kyogre if they're not Choice Scarf. If they are Choice Scarf, it does get problematic, but at least you're putting immediate pressure on that Serena and not really giving it that free switch into Kyogre. And if they lead Kyogre, then you should definitely be leading something else. That's kind of all there is to it. It's like it's tough. It's a really tough matchup, but again, there are definitely ways to improve it. And you do have two grass types, and you have a Scarf Urshifu, and you can still do Calyrex stuff. The other thing that I was thinking about with a like Spell Tag or Choice Specs Calyrex is that you can actually EV your Calyrex to live a Scarf Water Spout from Kyogre because they have to be timid to outspeed the Calyrex in the first place. And so it takes like 92 HP EVs to live it, but it's not great with a Life Orb because you're just taking the Life Orb tick and going down anyways, so you're not actually living the attack meaningfully, especially if the Kyogre isn't led. And so with that in mind, I didn't run it on this team, but it's something that you can consider on other versions of Calyrex teams to help patch that matchup. And then the other matchups, Zacian is pretty standard. You just get to run some combination of Incineroar, Rillaboom, Calyrex, Urshifu, I think are usually the four that you bring. And just you play the Fire, Water, Grass games, except you have to prioritize killing their Incineroar. And they have to be very careful with their Incineroar, but because they have to be very careful with their Incineroar, it's a lot easier for you to pivot. Whereas the Zacian doesn't, like, the Zacian obviously threatens the Calyrex, but it doesn't KO it after it gets intimidated, so you don't have to worry about it that much. The Rillaboom two-shots it unless it runs knockoff, and that's hit or miss. And then also, I ran into a surprising number of Incineroar that just don't have a Dark move, which I guess they just weren't respecting the Calyrex matchup because obviously you still wall it, but then you're just clicking Parting Shot, and I'm getting my Astral Barrage damage off, and I can switch out, I can switch back in. And if you're not actually threatening the Calyrex, then it's just so much easier to play against, and that was something that I saw, I think, 2 or 3 times over the course of the tournament. The Xerneas matchup, of course, the Neoligo is just absolutely insane there. If you don't expect to face Xerneas as much, then you can probably drop the Neoligo for something that helps into Torn Ogre. But this is where like there are trade-offs in team building, and you have to choose what you're going to respect and what you're not going to respect. And so in this version of the team, we respected Xerneas a lot more than Kyogre. And so the Neoligo is on the team, and Encore's on Whimsicott, where those are slots that could easily be changed. And I faced 3 Xerneas in Swiss, so it was definitely meaningful. Yeah, and so what else is there? Eternatus, I didn't face any, but you have Psyshock on Calyrex, so I think this is like a pretty free matchup. And then those are the main teams, right? Opposing Calyrex teams, I faced 2 of them in Top Cut and 1 of them in Swiss. And of course, you will be able to watch the 2 of them that I faced in Top Cut. Overall, it's a really interesting dynamic where I think at the end of the day, it comes down to a speed tie if you play it perfectly. And if you don't play it perfectly, if one person doesn't play it perfectly, then you can potentially gain a speed advantage with Whimsicott. And I mean, it's difficult. It's just a really volatile matchup. There's a lot of things, a lot of reads. That's the one thing where like people say Calyrex is read heavy. It's really not, especially this version. You can play it very safely, but you have the option to make an aggressive read that will win you the game at any given point, which I really like. It means that my opponent is on the back foot, and when my opponent is on the back foot, that means that I can use my pivoting mons really effectively. But the Calyrex mirror, when you play it too conservatively, you can get punished. And when both players have that dynamic where they have the option to play conservatively, but one read can win them the game, it becomes very difficult to play. That being said, I do think my top 32 set against Calyrex was very, very clean, and my final set was certainly something to watch. I'm not very happy with my play in this final set, and I guess you'll see why. And with that in mind, those were the matchups that I was thinking about. The tournament run itself, I don't want to talk about Top Cut because you'll be able to watch all those in another video, but Swiss I didn't record. I normally record all my matches for a tournament just in case of like disputes about disconnections and whatnot, and also potentially to make content, but I never figured out exactly how I wanted to do it. This tournament, I figured I wasn't going to do well, so I just didn't record it until Top Cut, and so I don't really have any video recollection of it, but I started out 2-0, I played Crazy Mix round 2, and then I also, as you can see here, I played Crazy Mix in Top Cut as well. Crazy Mix went 6-1 in Swiss, so I was his only loss, and then I also was his only loss in Top Cut. So that was pretty insane. And honestly, I thought I had a fantastic matchup against him. Of the 4 games that we played, 3 of them were not close. So that's just what it is. I lost round 3 against Standard Tornogre, like I mentioned. Round 4, I played against this, which I just had to highlight because it is Rillaboom, Xerneas, and then 4 answers to Calyrex. And the Rillaboom is Life Orb, which really messes up our calcs because as you might remember, the Neoligo is EV to live a Rillaboom attack, and the Urshifu is EV to live a Rillaboom attack, but certainly not a Life Orb Rillaboom attack. Then it also means that it has better ranges into Calyrex, even though it means that Calyrex also does more damage into it. I was just not having this. I did not have a good way to play this and just got absolutely bodied. And so, credit where credit is due. Although that being said, I guess they didn't face that many Calyrex for the rest of the tournament because they went 3-1 to 4-3. And so it was a cool team. And then after that, in round 5, I have my notes right here. Round 5, I faced a Calyrex Mienshao team, so like a mirror. And game 1, I just outplayed them, and game 2, I won the speed tie. And like I said, close Calyrex games usually come down to a speed tie. I won the speed tie, so I won the set. Round 6, I played a Xerneas team, and it turns out that Xerneas is very easily pinned by the combination of Neoligo and Calyrex, and so that really wasn't a problem. And then round 7, I faced Ranghome, who I know has done very well in the Australian Players' Cup in the past, so I recognize the name, and they were running pretty standardization stuff. In game 1, I blew them out, and game 2, they missed an Electroweb with Regieleki, and if they'd hit, I think I was in an okay position. I definitely I would still get the attack off, and so I still think I had a chance to win the game. But they missed, and it was just a blowout from there because suddenly Calyrex is at neutral speed. So that was really cool, and that kind of pushed me into Top Cut. And that being said, I don't think I played especially well. I beat the teams I was supposed to beat. A lot of the teams, I faced 3 Xerneas, and I beat 2 of them, and the one that I lost to was a hard counter team. I lost to the one tough matchup that I faced, and then the rest of the teams were generally didn't have great Calyrex matchups, or at least I had teched out for them. A lot of them just didn't have dark moves on Incineroar. Overall, it was not that difficult a tournament run. Maybe I'm understating it. This team does require you to position well. It requires you to know when to play aggressively and when to play passively. And those are just things that you understand over the course of playing Pokemon for a long time. And also I beat Crazy Mix round 2, and he buoyed my resistance there because he went X1, and that's obviously beating a very good player there. So it's not like I played bad players by any means over the course of the tournament. It was just a weird run. It was like I mentioned in my tweet, I felt like I was clicking buttons. I didn't feel like I had to put a ton of thought into the games, but that was kind of what I was trying to do, and it just kind of speaks to the strength of the team. My philosophy with Pokemon is that if I can work less hard than my opponent and win games at a similar rate, why would you work harder to win games? Why would you it's the same mentality when we're talking about using off meta restricteds. Why? You can probably still win, you can do well with them, but if you're not winning more games than you would with a standard restricted, you're probably working a lot harder to do it. And I would just rather use a good Pokemon and work and have my games be easier. So that's kind of the mentality there. Again, I will talk about Top Cut in another video. But again, I genuinely think that this team kind of plays itself in a lot of respects. You get to use the same tools in terms of Incineroar, Rillaboom, Urshifu that every other team in the format is using. You just get to set up easier endgames than Zacian teams. You get to punish your opponent's misplays a lot more. That was something else that came up was Zacian teams are a little more forgiving of opponents' misplays because when your opponent misplays, what happens is you get into a better position, right? And then you use that positional advantage over the course of 5 or 6 turns to slowly accumulate damage. And if you lose that positional advantage, you lose the game. With Calyrex, if your opponent makes a misplay and you get into a positional advantage, you click Astro Barrage and you win the game. And that's kind of what I mean, not always. Sometimes it takes one or two turns to like fully manifest itself, but that's kind of the reason why this team is a little easier to play. I had a good time playing it, and I mentioned like how I might tech it, but I definitely, if you're looking at using Calyrex, again, this is just by far the best Calyrex team. These 6 Pokemon at the very least, I'm sure it can be optimized a little further, but I encourage you to try it out. And yeah, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, I will see you all later.